The majority of LinkedIn content is and I'm going to tell you why. There's no story without conflict. Everybody likes to think that they don't care what people think about them, but it's like such a lie. A big example is fine art. So I used to work in the art world and people would come in and they would drop $80,000 on like a piece of art that is essentially useless.
So the goal of this episode is we want to break down our process and strategy of how to build a winning campaign.
There are definitely three main mistakes that people make when they're building out their content strategy for LinkedIn. The first one is I'm going to share with you 6 concepts that you can use to embed in your campaigns and make them contagious. The biggest mistake that I see on social campaigns is be online all the time.
Yeah.
Never take your eyes off of your
It's
phone.
okay to brain rot on TikTok.
It's
and all social media
encouraged even.
The whole idea of like steal like an artist. Nothing is truly original. Like every idea comes from a source.
It's also important to sort of take time for yourself to think and visualize and meditate on things. I've come up with my best campaign ideas just walking by myself in the morning.
Can you tell us a little bit about what the iceberg theory is?
The iceberg theory that we just invented is the Duolingo owl recently appeared at a Charlie XCX show and like went massively viral. Like they saw their chance and they took it. They didn't wait.
People come on social media to be entertained. They don't want to come on social media to be hard sold to.
Never make decisions based in fear, because the worst thing that you can be online is forgettable.
Sarah, what do you think about the majority of LinkedIn content?
Okay, in my opinion, the majority of LinkedIn content is fucking bullshit. And I'm going to tell you why.
Tell us a little bit about what you do here at Midnight and what your role is with creative and content strategy.
Okay, so I'm head of creative strategy at Midnight Marketing. And we're a digital marketing agency that works primarily with LinkedIn social campaigns because we're B2B.
So the goal of this episode is we want to break down our process and strategy of how to build a winning campaign. But to start off with, Sarah, what do you think are some of the biggest mistakes that brands make when it comes to executing and building their campaigns?
So I think there are definitely 3 main mistakes that people make when they're building out their content strategy for LinkedIn. The first one is making fear-based decisions. So trying to play it too safe, trying not to rock the boat, not doing content that you know will resonate with your audience because you have a fear of looking unprofessional or offending somebody or eliciting like a very strong emotional reaction. It's a huge mistake because you actually want to do those things. The second thing would be trying to appeal to everybody, thinking that everyone is your target audience. That's almost never true. I know people who like don't even like pizza, so nothing appeals to everybody.
By trying to appeal to everyone, you're going to appeal to no one.
Exactly. And in my opinion, the biggest mistake that I see on social campaigns is going for the hard sell every single time. I think that sort of reveals like a misunderstanding of what social media and digital marketing social media is for.
The majority of people who are consuming content, they're either there to be entertained or they want to see value. So if you're showing up and going for the hard sell every time, you're missing out on a huge opportunity to engage with your audience. And every individual who's looking at your content isn't necessarily in a place where they're ready to make a purchasing decision. So you have to think of the customer journey when you're creating your content and hit the different steps of, educational content that entertains, and eventually bottom of funnel content. You can go for the hard sell. But if all of your content is going for the hard sell, you're going to alienate your audience.
Yeah, really fast. Like, why would they follow you if all they get is ads?
I think a good example of a brand who doesn't play it safe on social is Liquid Death. They built a $1 billion brand based off selling water in a can.
Yep. And their content is definitely not safe. It's very polarizing. It doesn't appeal to everybody, but that's why they've built such a cult following. The people who love it really love it.
Yeah, and I think it comes down also to signaling as well. Like people will purchase their product because they want to signal something about themselves.
Absolutely, yeah. It's like an identity thing. Like sometimes when I first saw like their murder men series, I was like, okay, this is for me. Like they're using that sort of like Adult Swim, old school like cartoon vibe because they know their audience so well. They know like they love that shit, so they're gonna eat it up.
And I think it's interesting as well because like Liquid Death came into an industry where everyone positioned themselves the same. Like all water brands position themselves as this like pure, pristine, like, mountain water. But coming in with complete polarizing branding and packaging, they were able to be like a purple cow within their market space and differentiate themselves. And that's an opportunity everyone has the opportunity to do on social with being bold and not being afraid of being polarizing. With that example in mind, let's break down like the 5-step process of how to build a winning campaign.
So the first step is sort of defining your story. So if your brand has an overarching story, your digital marketing campaign should be a chapter within that story. So a chapter that sort of forwards the overall narrative, but kind of stands by itself. It has its own themes, it has its own characters, it has its own conflict. There's no story without conflict. So the conflict in our story is that our product solves this problem, or it can be as like going back to liquid death, it can be as simple as murder your thirst. So very simple conflict, I'm thirsty and liquid death will help me murder my thirst.
I think it's very important to have a clear understanding of what the overarching story is and like how your campaign is going to fit within a chapter. Like if it doesn't relate and it doesn't relate to the overarching story of your brand, then you're gonna stray down the wrong path.
Yeah, definitely. Like we have to also like we get rid of cool content all the time just because it doesn't resonate or it doesn't fit into the overall narrative. um it's that question you have to ask yourself, like, am I doing this because it's cool, or am I doing this because it makes sense to do? So yeah, another important thing that you want to do is sort of define your aesthetic. So every brand has to have like a very, very recognizable aesthetic. I like to think about movie directors. So when you watch a Wes Anderson movie, you know it's a Wes Anderson movie. If you see a frame from a Quentin Tarantino movie, you know that it's a Quentin Tarantino movie right away. The same sort of thing has to apply to your all of your branding and all of your visuals.
Yeah, like every design choice, every element has to fit within the overarching story of your brand and narrative and push that narrative forward.
Absolutely. So every choice has to be intentional. Um, yeah. And another thing you can do is think about the overall narrative so they have characters in the story. So the same thing with your brand and your presence on social media, you're gonna want to have recurring characters as well. So a good example of that is the ClickUp HR guys, who are like these like super cringe nerdy HR guys, but are really compelling characters because people who use ClickUp are sort of familiar with cringy HR guys, and so it really resonates with their audience.
Did you see recently ClickUp introduced a chat feature and they did a viral um in real life marketing stunt where they hired paid actors to chant on the streets in San Francisco saying cut the slack, and the HR guys were like front and center like doing their fucking stupid dances, and it got like 5 million impressions from pushing the boundaries and having bold messaging and not taking themselves too seriously as well, which I think is a very important thing to address when you're mapping out your campaign and defining your story. Okay, so now that we have our story defined, we understand the chapter that our campaign is fitting within the overarching story. What is the next step that we need to take?
Okay, so the next step is research. You're going to want to identify all of the competitors within your space. Take a look at their social media. Basically, be chronically online. Be online all the time.
Yeah,
Never take your eyes off of your
it's
phone.
okay to brain rot on TikTok
It's
and all social media platforms.
encouraged,
Yeah,
even. It's necessary.
yeah. It's
Um,
research.
it's research. Yeah, it's research. Yeah, so take a look at it. Don't just absorb it mindlessly. Analyze it, look at what is working, what is not working, and identify areas where you can sort of jump in and fill a gap that isn't being filled. So, for example, like take it back to ClickUp again. I cannot think of another B2B software company, yeah, that has like super cringy dance videos. But there's obviously like a need for it. It's resonating. It like people like it and they like sharing it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And like with strong enough research, like going back to the liquid death example again, like they were able to create their own category. And with good enough research, you can position yourself and see, okay, there's a gap here that we can address and we can have our unique stamp within our industry.
Yeah, and in terms of like researching different content types, keeping inspiration for ideas, like my weapon of choice is Pinterest, like most women. So like I just keep boards of Pinterest. Like I have one that's ads to steal, designs to steal, taglines to steal. Um, yeah, sorry. That's I'm just stealing constantly. But it's a very effective strategy.
Well, then again, like nothing is truly original. Like every idea comes from a source, and like the whole idea of like steal like an artist, take and borrow ideas from like so many different places that people don't recognize where you've borrowed from because you've gone heavy into the research phase, and that's so important when you're building a campaign.
Yeah, totally. And then you put your own spin, you put your own narrative in it as well.
Yeah.
Like don't just like vomit it up like wholesale.
Yeah, and then you can insert your overarching brand voice into it and have your own unique spin on it. But it's so important to address heavy research into your campaign
Hmm.
before going into the granular details.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, how are you going to create something that resonates with people online if you're not online?
Yeah.
Like, you kind of are your own audience in a way,
Hmm.
always.
Um, when it comes to like visuals, what are the most important steps you should take when you're mapping out the visual identity of your campaign when it comes to the research phase?
For me, the most important thing is like the visualization stage. So I feel like it's very hard to like come up with a new creative idea if you're just constantly being harassed with like other ideas. So like I know we just talked about how important it is to be online. And it is, but it's also important to sort of take time for yourself to think and visualize and meditate on things. So I've come up with my best campaign ideas just walking by myself in the morning when there's no other inputs. So you can come up with like a creative idea, but you can also like fully visualize it. What does it look like? What are the colors like? What does it sound like? What is the like if it was an animal, what would it move like? You know, like if it was a movie, what genre would it be? And then everything follows that sort of idea. Like everything follows the main idea. Um this is like the funnest part for me. I mean, I love the creative briefing ideation stage.
And I think as well to add to that, like the more elements that you can add within that research and visualization, the more layers that you have to your campaign and your story. Like we spoke earlier about like how important it is to have like a certain aesthetic when it comes to um motion design. Like what story does your motion tell about the campaign? How does that tie into the overarching story? Sound design, like all of these details really matter. Um, Building out the layers of storytelling for your campaign.
That yeah, that's something we're big on at Midnight Marketing is creating like a not only a visual identity for each of our brands, but also like an audio sound identity for each of our brands. So we like to keep a library of different sound effects for each of our brands. Also keep like a few like key tracks, like music tracks that you can use that like sort of stay on topic and stay on brand. I think yeah, sound is like a really underrated part of the whole design aesthetic.
And what do you think are some like key pillars, content pillars that you can lean on when you're planning out the research phase?
So definitely um something that's effective kind of all the time is like the meet the founder story. So explaining why does the brand exist? Why did the founder start the company? Who are these people? Why should I care about them? Like for example, Midday Squares does this really well. like super well. So, I mean, if somebody came up to you and told you, like, hey, Rory, there are four main chocolate brands and that's it, you'd be like, I don't give a shit. Like, what do I care? Doesn't affect me at all. But they take that and they turn it into like this huge David and Goliath conflict. And they position themselves as sort of the heroes in that story. And then they take their audience and they make their audience a part of their journey. So they're like, we're going to be in Costco. We want to get our products into Costco, being totally transparent about their like journey as a company. Help us get there. And they kind of like bring you in.
Yeah, and it gets the audience invested in the problem. Like your audience connects with the what if they know the why. You need to be authentic and show like the full unfiltered truth of your story and behind the scenes. Like you can't always just be sharing the positive. It's also important to share the negative and just be totally transparent and honest with your content as well.
That's so true. Yeah.
So the next step is ideation. Can you tell us a little bit about what the iceberg theory is?
The iceberg theory that we just invented is the iceberg theory is just explaining like research and ideation versus and all of the work that goes into it, the support system versus the tip of the iceberg that pokes out from the top, which is all the creatives that your audience eventually sees. So all of the work that goes into it is like taking your research, making mood boards, making creative briefs. So briefing documents would be like um, things that you give to your creative team to make sure that they make all the right choices when they're actually doing the creatives. So directing them, like making sure that each font choice is intentional, each color choice is intentional, each image is there to further your narrative. It's not just like thrown at the wall, it's like an intentional choice. And also coming up with like the narratives behind everything. So, for example, like your audience eventually sees like a green color, you know that there's a whole reason why you chose it. There's like research that went behind it. You know that it will appeal to your target audience, for example, or you know the why behind it. You don't necessarily need to explain that to your audience, but they'll just see the green, right? And hopefully they'll like it because you've done your research. Hmm.
I think as well it's communicating that all of the research that's gone in the previous step, communicating all of that research into like the creative briefs that you're making and making sure that all of the language of your campaign and story is communicated and um, yeah, allowing your creatives to execute on that, which I think brings us to the next step of how do you take all of this research and ideation and actually execute your campaign?
Okay, yes, the boring part. So what you do is like you break it down, you get really granular with it, and we always put the like same exact things in a creative brief. So you're going to want to have your timeline because this is going to affect obviously not everybody has all the resources in the world. We work on a budget and we work on a timeline, so it's going to affect the creatives the output as well. You're going to want to put in the goals, your overarching goals, your messaging, your story, um, just like your brand visuals. So your mood board, things like that. Um, and basically, it's a communication tool. So you're trying to set up your team for success so that they know exactly what to do when they eventually execute.
How important is it to diversify your content when you're in the execution phase?
That's massively important because you're going to want to do that to test because you need to test, and see what works. Um, don't be afraid. Don't make fear based decisions. Like we said before, try different things, try different channels, try different types of content, and then see what resonates. You're never going to like grow and expand if you don't try new things, you know?
Yeah, you need to throw paint at the wall and test diverse creatives, and with that data, you'll be able to be guided and see what works and what resonates with your audience. Yeah, I think another important thing that we spoke about earlier is like another important thing that we spoke about earlier was like be honest with yourself. Like, would I enjoy consuming this piece of content?
That's the that's the ultimate test is like before you put something out, before you show something to your client, you're like, do I like this? Like, do I love it? Am I excited to show them? Am I excited to put it out into the world? If you're not excited about it, no one else will be. Like, nobody's gonna care about it on social media. Hmm.
I think it's important as well. You have to ask yourself the question like, am I providing any value, or
Mm-hmm.
like we said, are you just going in for the hard sell?
Are you just going into the hard sell? Yeah. Don't underestimate entertainment value.
Yeah,
Like, think about the only time a friend has ever shown you an ad on their phone
yeah,
and been like, you have to see this.
yeah.
It wasn't like buy bleach because it works so much better than other bleach. Like it's like something funny usually. Or
Yeah, you have to think like, would I share this piece of content
yeah.
with a friend or a coworker?
Mm-hmm.
Um, what value is my content providing?
Mm-hmm.
And going back to what we just said, like being guided by the data and testing and testing and testing, seeing what resonates. But it's so important to have in mind, like, am I providing value, and what is the overarching message of this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's it's important too to bring it back to your overarching message all the time. Otherwise you'd just be a meme page. You know?
I mean, there's nothing wrong with being a meme
Yeah,
page.
maybe we should all just be meme pages.
Yeah, something that actually gets shared and people engage with.
Yeah. Another thing, don't be too rigid. You want to stay agile in order to like respond to current trends. Because when something enters our news cycle or a meme cycle rather,
Yeah.
like it's so fast. You only have like a few days to actually like respond, sometimes less. So for example, like the Duolingo owl recently appeared at a Charlie XCX show and like went massively viral. Like they saw their chance and they took it. They didn't wait. They just went to the Charlie XCX show because they knew that she was like the TikTok queen of the moment, and it worked.
You need to act fast and respond to current trends. And I think Duolingo is like a great example of a team that acts fast and is always on top of the news cycle. And you're just borrowing engagement and conversation that people are already talking about and just inserting your brand into that narrative.
Yeah, and like also something else they did that I really love is like they took the jokes that people were making about their Duolingo owl being vaguely threatening and they just like leaned into it.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, he's vaguely threatening now. He's coming for you.
Yeah, same with Ryanair. They're another like brand that's great at responsive marketing. They understand who they are. They're a budget airline. They're not playing off to be this fancy, red carpet experience. A $20, £20 Euro flight, whatever. You're not gonna have like tons of leg room and like a huge window space, and they make fun of that. And their whole content is like kind of making fun of like the terrible customer service that they have. But we're a budget airline, so it fits within that overarching narrative. And the same with Duolingo. Their responsive content, it also fits within the overarching narrative of their brand.
I mean, yeah, Ryanair, they're authentic. They know themselves. They don't have pretensions. They're not trying to be something that they're not.
And I mean, we have spoke about this, but like humor is such a powerful tool to use in your campaigns and stories. Like we said, people come on social media, like social media should be treated like a TV show. Like people come on social media to be entertained. They don't want to come on social media to be hard sold to. So yeah, don't take yourself too seriously, and don't don't be afraid of polarizing with your content. I think we mentioned earlier, like you have to be adaptable and ready to pivot if your campaign's just not headed in the right direction, and you have to be critical and look at the details of like why is this performing well, why is this not performing well, and what should I remove, what should I double down on.
Exactly, yes. Double down on what works. Always. There's no such thing as beating a dead horse on social media. You can post the same sort of content over and over and over again.
Exactly. Yeah, I feel people are afraid to recycle content, and truly like most content can literally just be repurposed and slightly changed, and most people aren't going to notice because when you post, the majority of people, let's say you have an account with 10,000 followers, only like 15% of those followers are actually going to see your post. So there's no problem with like reposting your content, recycling your content. It's actually a very powerful tool because people's attention spans are extremely short, and you need to keep repeating yourself to make sure your message is heard.
Social media is not a museum. Like, it's not like going up for posterity. Like, it's a feed. It's a living thing. It's constant.
Yeah.
It's so ephemeral. You see it and it's gone. So yeah, don't be afraid to like put it out several times. I mean, that's the only way that you're gonna get everyone to see it.
Now that we've gone through like the major steps of executing your campaign, what are some easy wins um, of content that every brand can easily make?
Okay, so definitely behind the scenes content. People want to see how the sausage is made actually. So they want to see what's it like in your office? Like what are some like jokes that you guys share in your office? Maybe there's somebody who's like super curmudgeon-y and you want to feature them on social media because it's funny. Or like we're thinking of several people. um um yeah, make it fun. Basically, you can do like fake confessionals, like the reality TV show format is very popular. Speaking directly to the camera, sharing your opinions, making it funny or not making it funny. You can also like just share like your opinion on industry news, position yourself as an expert, react to things that are going on in your industry, and just share like your opinion on them.
I think, especially right now, if you're a B2B company on LinkedIn and you're not yet creating video content, like LinkedIn is becoming the new corporate TikTok. Like video content is exploding right now on the platform. And with the new introduction of the vertical video feed, um, video content is just hitting like astronomical levels of engagement and reach. So
Taking that, like extending that metaphor even further, like of like your brand is a narrative and then your digital marketing campaign is a chapter in the narrative or a scene in the movie. So yeah, so think about like characters that can be recurring on the TV show of your brand. Like
yeah,
for example, Shmeez, our little alien guy, he's always in our content. Um, he's just like a fun little alien guy who gets into hijinks and mischief all the time.
yeah, but that recurring storyline and theme,
Hmm.
um, it's familiar when it shows up on people's feed, and people
Yes.
now Shmeez is now a celebrity.
She's is a celebrity. He's like a stand-in for us all. He's like more famous than me, definitely. You maybe.
Yeah, I think another great format that brands should lean on is collab content. Like leveraging the existing audiences of like industry experts and influencers in your niche. Um, let's say you're creating like a breakdown of like how a certain creator or brand is killing it right now on social. If your case study and your content is effective enough, you're gonna pull in that audience and you're just gonna like ride the wave of their audience. So um, I think identify industry experts in your niche and position your content uh, to partner with them and collaborate with them. And it's much easier to scale and grow your audience when you're just able to lean on partnering with other creators and brands and leveraging their audiences.
Yeah, definitely. Like the recent Yeti and Liquid Death collab, where they made like a coffin cooler. Genius. Also, there's a YouTuber that I follow that recently did a sword collab. So there's like branded swords you can buy.
What kind of sword was it?
Like a fucking sword, like a forged in steel sword. Like like a sword. Like
But
I
what are
don't.
you gonna do with this sword, Sarah?
I'm gonna learn sword fighting, obviously.
Is it just like a decoration? You're gonna hang it up on your wall,
Yeah,
or
like put it above the TV, like
right?
a
You're not
yeah.
gonna carry it around the office or in public.
I might one of these days.
One last point to add to like uh to collab content is use partnerships and collaboration as amplifiers for your content.
Yeah, so don't waste your time like doing a collaboration with somebody that doesn't have anything to do with like your audience. Yeah. Do it like be intentional with your choice of collaboration.
Yeah, your collaborations have to have like product market fit and they have to fit within the narrative of your campaign. But when done effectively, I think it's a great amplifier to spread the message of your campaign. All right, so why do campaigns go viral then?
So social currency is pretty much anything that makes someone feel cool to know about or makes someone feel cool to share with somebody. Um,
It's like insider knowledge.
Insider knowledge, yeah. Um, the first example that comes to mind for me is that there's this really gross $2 noodle place in downtown Montreal that's only open like after midnight till 5 a.m. And they have a secret code. So if you say I'm a historian, you get like a free egg roll. And it's popping off, and I think because like it's always super popular because I think people like to tell people about the secret code. They're like, "Hey, if you go there, then you say a secret code, you get a free egg roll." And it's like the best example of social currency in marketing. So they make nasty noodles, but they're marketing geniuses actually.
How do you make people think of your product or brand like in an everyday situation?
So you have to embed a trigger in your marketing that makes people think about it when they're not actively looking at your ad. Even the best ad, like the most well created ad ever, can be forgettable if you don't embed a trigger to make people think about it later. So think to do this, just sort of think about your customer's journey. Think about what they're doing and what's around them when you want them to use the service. So for example, KitKat did that really famously by associating themselves with breaks. So now you're like on a break and you're like, KitKat bar, it's time for a KitKat bar. So they embedded the trigger in their ad creatives. Um, Sort of the ultimate form of this, I would say, is when like the brand sort of overtakes the action itself. So for example, like Googling something, like the product overtook the actual action, so nobody thinks about engines anymore, they think about Google or Ubering. Like
Making your product become a verb is the ultimate goal.
the ultimate goal. You're like infiltrating people's actual lives and actions. You're like, I'm doing the brand right now. Like I'm Ubering somewhere and like everybody knows what that means. So that's the ultimate trigger, the ultimate social engineering.
Yeah, I think like just to build on that, you need to tell like an emotional story. Nike, for example, is great at doing this. Like all of their ads tell emotional stories about like the athletes and the transformational outcome that putting on a pair of Nikes does for you. So tell emotional stories that that connect with your customer profile and your target audience.
Yeah, definitely that's effective. And Nike's great at that. Another thing is make it visible and make it public. So the concept of like being able to see your brand when other people are using it. The famous example is Apple. So the Apple logo actually used to face the user, and they changed it so they flipped it around so that when it's in use, it's actually facing the public. So everyone can look at that person and be like, oh, that person's using an Apple laptop. And there are innovators in that. Now everybody does that. But I think they were the first. I might just be making that up. Like, it's such a simple thing. But like, generally, when you design a product, you make it so that it's like facing the user, but they thought about the general public seeing it, seeing it in use.
Yeah, whether it's good or bad. I think a great example of this is the recent Nike campaign that they ran during the Olympics. Winning isn't for everyone. But I think that the broader point that I'm trying to say is that you need to tell emotional stories because the worst thing you can do for your campaign is not elicit an emotional response, whether it's good or bad.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to be forgettable. That's the biggest thing. You need to stick in people's minds.
Yeah, because the end goal, like we said, is shareability, virality, and um, avoiding wallpaper content at all costs that people don't have any emotional response to. So
I think we all know, especially with like political rhetoric and stuff, things that make you angry are incredibly shareable.
yeah, like negative hooks.
Negative hooks are very powerful. Another thing that really you need to keep in mind when dealing with human beings is that we are not rational creatures. And so we will make purchasing decisions in order to have that extra social currency. So like a big example is like fine art. So I used to work in the art world, and people would come in and they would drop $80,000 on like a piece of art that is essentially useless. That'll go up in their home. That won't appreciate in value. Actually, will depreciate in value very fast. That's a misconception. Most modern art is like um, completely valueless after you buy it. So it's just purely a status symbol that you place inside your home.
How does that relate back to social currency when you're like mapping out your campaign?
You have to understand that people kind of care what others think about them way more than we think we do, and that we make decisions all the time just based on how it's going to make us look to others. Everybody likes to think that they don't care what people think about them, but it's like such a lie.
Well, it's like, for example, like Liquid Death, their positioning and branding of their products, like it's signaling like when you purchase this product, I'm saying something about myself.
That's true. It's like aspirational marketing. So you're like tapping into this person's sense of identity. You're like, oh, I'm the type of person that would use this product. I'm the type of person that has expensive art in my home. I have a very good taste. I'm very artsy. I'm very creative, that sort of thing. Yeah, you're right. Liquid Death does that really well. You're like, I'm not into regular water. I'm like cool. I'm super cool and rebellious. I like canned water with skulls on it.
Okay, so now that we've covered all of the key steps to map out when you're building your campaign, I just want to quickly recap some of the key points. As a brand, you need to create engaging, shareable content that resonates with your audience. Treat your content like a TV show. Introduce repeatable characters and formats that your audience is going to recognize. And I think most importantly of all, avoid wallpaper at all costs and don't be afraid of a negative reaction when you're creating your content and mapping out your content strategy.
Never make decisions based in fear because the worst thing that you can be online is forgettable.
As we finish off, I want you to share like one of your favorite meme pages.
Okay, I'm gonna share, yeah, a passion of mine, which is looking at memes on the internet. And one of my favorite creators is Cities by Diana, at Cities by Diana on Instagram. So it sounds kind of weird, but she mostly makes memes about like just making fun of American cities and talking about how like um she loves to waste gasoline on the highway and how much she loves highways and how much we should build more highways, which sounds really like not compelling, but it's like it's so good. She
is
also
she,
has
is she
this
being
series.
truthful when she says that?
No, no, she's being completely just like completely sarcastic. Yeah. And she has this series where she like redesigns every state flag using like TikTok brain rot references. It's really great. Yeah.
Do you want to share your shadow banned LinkedIn page?
Oh, yeah. Can I appeal directly to LinkedIn and ask them to unshadow ban me?
I don't know. I don't know if that's the best thing to mention while you're giving people advice on the campaigns when you're when your LinkedIn is shadow banned.
It is, yes. LinkedIn, if you're watching this, please unshadow ban me. I'll abide by every single community guideline.